So let's examine life now for Ruth with Naomi. So good evening. Welcome back to my channel. We are here for part 2 of Ruth and Naomi. So let's recap where we left off last time. We've learned about so far Naomi's plight, journeying with her husband to Moab, and later suffering a loss of her husband and her 2 sons, and left just with her 2 daughter-in-laws. And with that, only Ruth was moved to journey back with her to Bethlehem. And it's a lot to be said about that. It had to be something that was character-wise with Naomi that would move Ruth to culturally stay with her mother-in-law, considering the loss. The loss was just not Naomi's, but it was also Ruth's, because she was married to her son. So this would be a mark that God would use this situation for the good, not just for Ruth alone, but later. So let's read here. And again, we're just going by a synoptic view so that we're not long-winded. So returning to Bethlehem must have been a very difficult decision for Naomi to make. All that she was had died in Moab, considering we know that many women were more or less measured in society as being a married woman and also having children. But she heard that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them in Bethlehem. This is Ruth 1:6. Now we know that the famine has been released, so now she can return. Naomi understood that life for her back in her village of Bethlehem would be better. God commanded the Israelites to protect the weakest people in the community. Do not deprive the foreigner or the fatherless of justice, or take the cloak of the widow as a pledge. Remember that you were slaves in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. That is why I command you to do this. Deuteronomy 24:17-18, also Exodus 22:22. The second chapter of Ruth opens with a hopeful reminder. Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing, whose name was Boaz. Ruth 2:1. However, life for Ruth in Bethlehem would not be any easier. She is female, a foreigner, barren, and a widow. Again, this is just how society measured women, and it's much different, of course, to today, but then not so much, because sometimes women who are barren are also looked upon or chastised for not having children or even being married. But in this case, God still gets the glory and got the glory out of this situation, as we will read further. Yes, her commitment was firm and exemplary. She took it upon herself to care for her sorrowful mother-in-law. As it turned out, Ruth 2:3, the text tells us, perhaps with a knowing smile and a wink, that Ruth just happened to be getting her grain in a plot of land that belonged to Boaz. So let's kind of characterize that. Ruth decided to leave Moab all that she knew and she grew up. But she also had the influence of Naomi and her father-in-law before passing, and that of her husband, who knew the way of the Lord. So this began to condition her now and give her a thought process about who is God, who is the Lord, who is this Lord thy God that helped the Israelites in a time of need, the chosen people and deliverer, you know. So I'm pretty sure that sparked an interest in her, and we can see if her to be moved to just stay with her mother-in-law. She had nothing, just as Naomi had nothing anymore. So what did she have to lose? And I think it was that great faith that she had, even really not having that much of a relationship or connection. She connected through Naomi. And sometimes I think we can find ourselves in those situations today. We may not have a situation, a relationship with the Lord, but somehow we can be guided through someone we do know that does have a relationship and move to be curious and see, who is this God? Who is Jesus Christ? So we can gather that from this, or as we say, what Ruth was doing in Boaz's field, glean. We can glean from the scriptures the possibility of what was transpiring, what is behind the text, exegesis. Not so much as an opinion, but to give real deep thought. And you have to also allow the Holy Spirit to give that to you. And some things sometimes, even on its face, just make sense that this might be a possibility of what you're gathering out of the scriptures. So as we see, Ruth meets Boaz at a certain point, and we'll read there. So Boaz, a worthy man. These three Hebrew words, Ish, Gabor, Hail, are used to describe Boaz in Ruth 2:1, translated sometimes as a man of standing or a worthy man. These words offer clues to the character of Boaz. The first part of the expression, Ish Gibor, means man mighty in. So like within, man mighty in. And Hail can mean strength, power, ability, honor, and wealth, depending on the context. In this social context, the expression means a man strong in wealth, ability, and honor. In other words, Boaz is a man well respected and known for his character and leadership. The name Boaz probably means in strength. Socially, Boaz stands galaxies away from Ruth's own social status. Of course, typically, how can you relate that today? I guess most women are categorized as maybe gold diggers in a sense. But if we take this text more seriously, this is not the case. Even if you have women today who are generally and seriously taking their faith to another level where they are praying for a mate and have certain attributes there that they're looking for. So, these are honorable attributes: wealth, ability, and honor. You can have men who are wealthy that you look at and poor character. Then you have the men with great character that have wealth. Wealth isn't always measured by the exact dollar. It can be, but when you look at it in a spiritual sense, there's much more to wealth. And you have to dig deeper when you're looking for that specific character in a man. So to have wealth, ability, honor, as we say, is great characteristics. So that's why it stands galaxies away from what Ruth's own social status of definitely poor in spirit being in Moab, especially the idolatry that was happening there. So this is miles away from what she would have been used to. And have you ever been in that place where you're trying to experience something, but at the same time, you're still miles away from literally connecting to that experience? So sometimes we have to dig deeper so that what is being manifested in whatever's in front of you, it could be a job, a career, a mate, whatever it might be on the female side or the male side, but it's so far from what you're used to that you have to kind of take a step back and reevaluate how that you're going to really connect to this experience, um, and your ability to move forward, because being with or finding that mate through a spiritual connection can sometimes be difficult, because of different backgrounds and where you come from. Even though something is ordained to be, there's still an experience to happen within the experience of the relationship, if you follow me. Again, if anyone have questions or if anything you feel that I missed or something that you would love me to delve into, write a comment and let me know. So we also learn about Boaz's spiritual character, as we were just talking about, when he arrives at his field and greets his servant. That's honorable. It's very noble. He could be distant, far, far away from where his status is versus where his servants are. I can tell you a lot too that coincide with Jesus coming to serve and not lead. He led though in his servitude, if you understand what I mean. So when he arrives at his field and greets his servants, Boaz is a pious and well-liked person. His servants' love for him suggests that he is a fair and honest person. You don't find that a lot today. Fair and honest people. He is so in touch with his servants that he even notices a new person following his harvesters. He approaches Ruth and makes an offering that speaks volumes about his character. Boaz greets his servants with, "The Lord be with you." That's, wow, what a line. You wouldn't even see a line like that today. Oh, what's up? Just a little joke there. The Lord be with you, Ruth 2:4. Indeed, the Lord's presence becomes evident in Boaz just by that greeting alone. His own righteous and compassionate character towards his servants and Ruth. Boaz makes offers to Ruth worthy of his character. Permission to stay in his field, permission to be with his servants, protection from the men in the field, and provision to share in the water of his workers. Isn't that amazing? So God teaches, as the word says, about being there for the foreigner. And with Ruth being a foreigner outside of her country and being welcomed in such a way, this is the behavior that a believer should present, especially to those who are unaware or, again, not socially connected or spiritually connected. How else would they know if you not witnessed it to them? Although the first offer fulfills the command to provide for the poor, Leviticus 19:9, 23:22, and Deuteronomy 24:19, Boaz went far beyond the requirements of the law. Ruth's social conditions places her below even the poor Israelites following the harvesters. Not only that, but providing his protection to her from the men reminds us that women then, as often is the case today, are easy targets for abuse and violence. Wow. Just wow. Everything that you would want a man to possess, to be so attentive, to be, yes, attentive, but so aware, to like cover all those bases like that. I mean, he's what people will call a unicorn, like someone you've never seen before, but only person that can do something like that is God. And someone like Boaz, who for a long time have shaped himself by the word. So, however, Boaz offered more than protection. He made Ruth, for all practical purposes, part of his household. Again, Ruth was socially far below Boaz's servants, but now she is to share in their water. Further, Boaz invites Ruth to his own table to share his bread. It is more than a generous gesture. It is a righteous and compassionate deed. That is what we can learn from that. That people who come from all walks of life, and even sometimes really if they will allow you to, that you can have such a generous gesture as they say, but do it in righteousness and compassion. You mean it. It comes from the heart. And that's only because of the character that you build and your relationship that you have with the Father. And this is how and what we're called to do and be to others, whether in or outside of Christ. This is the common goal for us all, in spite of. I know sometimes our flesh is tested, but we have to learn in certain situations to learn to temper ourselves with the posture of Christ. And we know that phrase, what would Jesus do, even though this is earthly or worldly thing, but it still is a great thought to think about when we're operating in our spaces, wherever it be work, on the street, at the grocery store, anywhere. What would he do in a certain circumstance? How would he respond? What would be more thoughtful? What would be the right way instead of wanting to do things out of our flesh? However, Boaz is not finished with showcasing his character. Unknown to Ruth, he orders his servants to leave extra grain and even stalks of wheat for Ruth to pick up. Ruth ends up with about 30 pounds of grain to take home. According to documents from Babylon, around that time, harvesters would take home 1 or 2 pounds a day. Ruth took home more than 10 times the salary of a harvester. Amazing. In addition, she took home leftover cooked grain for Naomi. While the great amount of grain Ruth brought back home was impressive for a hungry Naomi, the sight of already cooked grain was a blessing beyond words. Ruth's care and commitment soothed Naomi's bitterness and grief. This relationship, and we all need that. You see the dichotomy of Naomi change in attitude, especially her background versus Ruth's background. The relationship was necessary. And even in the death of her husband and her 2 sons, you can see that whatever may happen and why it might happen, we can imply a lot of different things. Was it God's hand because they went to idolatrous country or not? Whatever it might be, what fruit can we see come from it? What can we glean as Ruth gleaned the fields? What can we see come of it? We see bitter, hurt mother-in-law, but we see a very optimistic daughter-in-law, even in her own loss. But she aids her mother-in-law through the process just as much as she's trying to process it herself. And God intervention just for Boaz, not even to the point of what is going to happen next, but just showing the compassion that God asks of us when it comes to mingling with others or interacting with others. So, why did Boaz act in such a way towards Ruth? The answer in part is that he acted from his own commitment and character. So hard to find committed people with good character. We're really not asking for people to be perfection. That doesn't happen until Christ comes and gathers his harvest. But we do ask that people take the time to actually perfect the gift of or perfect the trying of bringing forth his characteristics, if you understand what I mean. So the answer is also found in his own words. Ruth bows down with her face to the ground, as a person in her social standing would be expected, and asks, "Why have I found such favor in your eyes that you notice me, a foreigner?" Ruth 2:10. And Boaz answers, "I've been told all about what you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of her husband." Ruth 2:11. Boaz is moved so much to compassion because of Ruth's own loyalty and commitment to Naomi's. Ruth's love and commitment to Naomi exemplified to him the attitude that God's people should have towards those in need. Ruth's understanding and selfless love and unrelenting love towards Naomi enraptured Boaz. So here you have someone displaying the fruits of the Spirit through Boaz, but because he displays and possesses those fruits of the Spirit, he's able to recognize it in another. And she didn't even really have a relationship with Christ. She came with her mother-in-law to learn, to further learn, because I'm pretty sure being married and in the family in Moab, she taught the way of the Lord to her. Again, that's probably what moved her to go with Naomi, because she had nothing else either. But at the same time, you never know how much of you witnessing just through your own behaviors, your mannerisms, your righteous ability to just see a need that need to be fulfilled. And this is what Boaz saw in her, God's characteristics. It's a blessing upon blessing. Okay, we're going to end here because I'm probably going to have to do a part 3. This is so good. In the times of the Bible, marriage was more an economic than romantic affair. Boaz had nothing to gain from courting a foreign woman from the lowest rung of the social ladder, and that is exactly what makes Boaz's actions even more extraordinary. A man doing what is right without expecting anything in return. You don't see that today. It's always a give and take. You wanted something in return. That's why this displays the unconditional love that the Father has for us. Mankind will always have it to have this give and take all the time, or as people talk about 80-20 rule, or however they want to divide it, the 50-50, whatever it is. But here, as it says, because of his character and his relationship, making his actions extraordinary. A man doing what is right without expecting anything in return. Boaz's loving actions were a response to Ruth's own loving commitment and loyalty to Naomi. Although not at the same social level, Ruth is his match on a spiritual level. Amen. So we're going to get to the part of the marriage. There's a lot that happens next or in between getting to their marriage and everything. And we'll talk about it. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope that'll be a blessing to you, because it definitely is a blessing to me. Every time I read, I always glean something myself from it. Whatever that I think that I could do better, even in my own marriage or in my own life, or interacting with people, whatever it may be or is, you're always learning. So never stop learning, never stop growing. Always know there's always something to be glean from the scriptures or said from the scriptures that would allow you to allow God to make manifest in your life, to improve us, to make us better servants. God bless you and have a good night and see you next time. I will be posting my last video for those of you that did not see part one. It'll be right up here. So God bless you and have a good night.